Hey, I'm Tom from Sweet Maria's, and on my recent trip to Tanzania, I went up for a few days to Kilimanjaro, Moshi area in the northern growing region where I hadn't been before. And one morning waking up, I made a recording that seems to function like a podcast. And I thought, well, I'm going to put this together with images that aren't totally related, so I'll caption the images and put it on YouTube. And it's just one straight recording. And I thought it'd be kind of funny too if I don't edit it at all. So it's like 28 minutes or something of just talking, and it includes all of my I'm an ummer, and I sometimes take those out of my podcast recordings. But I thought, what the heck? Let's just let this one roll, and I'll caption the images. So I'm going to put this up as a podcast, but it's kind of neat to see it on YouTube. But either way, this is a day, early morning in Moshi as I'm getting ready to go out and look at some coffee farms. Thanks. Well, I heard the birds earlier. Now there's just some rain on the roof. It's been raining really hard here. This is Moshi near Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And I'm just waking up. It's like 6:45. I need to be ready to go at 8 o'clock. We're going to go visit some of the cooperative type stations around here, which are called AMCOs today. It's a little bit too early. We maybe are just starting to pick some coffee around here, but I'm pretty much out of season on this trip. I was in Rwanda next door, and they have very, very little crop this year. Or to come to Tanzania and kind of reconnect. I haven't been here for a long time, but we found a really nice coffee in the south from one of the AMCOs called Ilomba. And unfortunately getting down to Mbeya with the limited time I have and trying to get out and really see what's going on down there was a little bit tough. That's where I was on my last trip to Tanzania, but that was, I counted, almost 8 years ago. And a lot of that was because the people we were working with here pulled out of the country just because they have this habit of changing the regulations for coffee a lot in Tanzania. And at one time they had allowed exporters to work like more closely and directly to coordinate small lots from different stations and different farms and co-ops, and they suddenly prohibited that. They made all the coffee go into the auction, and that made it basically untraceable, or at least at the minimum you couldn't be sure you were even going to get the coffee you intended to get. So that company just decided to leave and move all their equipment and everything to another country. So that was weird and bad for the future of those relationships. Oh, there's some crows out there. I think those are crows. Anyway, it's kind of funny. At the beginning of my trips, I like to wake up and think about what I'm going to be doing and what I did the day before and make a little recording. Sometimes I talk to my phone this way, like just for me, and sometimes it's kind of like it's going to be a podcast. But I kind of miss a lot in the writing. When I used to keep little paper notebooks, it just kind of had bare facts, and I found when I went back to Oakland, I'd pretty much forgotten a lot of the stuff in between those sparse notes, and then now I sort of type them into notes on my phone, but misses a lot too. So kind of filling in the spaces in between the facts feels kind of important, especially when you're in the place and it's all fresh in your mind. I realize how much, like, when I travel in coffee, there's just this idea that I'm just immersed in this place and I'm, having this really long interaction with these people here. But I just really, it'd be fairer to say that I just breeze through in a lot of ways. You visit somewhere, maybe you've been there before, but you spend like 30 minutes. And like, I try to compensate for that by recording everything and taking photos and paying a lot of attention and asking my questions and stuff. But it's really, when you think about it, and that's why I think about how coffee buyers are tourists in a way, is that it's a really brief contact. And then you sometimes make the most out of it in terms of what you try to collect in information, but also in photos you take, and then you represent like you were there. And in coffee, people slip into this thing, and I have too, of saying, oh, we work with this station. And it's like, you visited 30 minutes, you buy their coffee. That's not working with somebody. And I don't want to take that too far critically, but there's a lot of work in coffee, and I do a lot of work, but it's not the work in actually producing coffee. So when you say you work with a station or a farm, they do a lot of work, and I think it really trivializes it to use the word work. I select lots and buy coffee from someone, and it's like important that they have a buyer, but that doesn't need to be inflated to make it seem like you have a big project with them, or you have a communication, you have a business relationship, and I think that's accurate to say. But work is another thing, and I'm sure in one of these recordings I'm going to say work, but it'll stand out to me. I'm trying not to do that. I'm also trying not to say that I source coffee. I just realized when I was thinking about something else that, like, sourcing, that kind of many interactions that kind of connect with a particular coffee producer, like go back and forth, figure out how you're going to deliver coffee, coordinate it, get the coffee milled, select which lots and grades, do troubleshooting on quality. Those are like the work of sourcing. And you just like pretty much have to be in the country to do that work. Like, you have to be there for the full season, I would say. I think that's the minimum, the qualifying bar to say, yeah, we source coffee. And like, I didn't go find these coffees. Like, they exist. And I don't do a lot of that back and forth. And I'm not here for a long period of time. So source is even an overreach in representing what my actual work is. So I decided that I'm a coffee selector. What I do is people who actually do all that work put options in front of me, and I basically select which ones I want and which ones I think are good and which ones I don't. And that feels pretty accurate. And it's, like a lot of things, it's kind of diminishing in the role that I really actually play. But it feels a lot better to go that way than I think the way coffee companies compete in the language they use to continually kind of try to outdo each other in saying how much work they do, how good they are, how close to the source they are. I think just gently and not hypercritically, just let's roll it back a bit and try to be accurate and think about words we use. That's what I want to do, and it just feels better. It feels more comfortable. And I also feel like it takes pressure off myself to describe my work that way. The other way I've talked about myself is, and what I do when I travel, is that I'm a personal shopper. Like, I don't buy these coffees for me. I buy them for my customers. So I'm here on their behalf to find really good coffee as best I can, to make good choices, and to try to find value in the coffee. I think some buyers feel like, just like some tourists feel like, oh, I can't haggle, I can't push back on a price someone gives me, and then they're like resentful that they paid something. Something I've read in reviews and whatever, TripAdvisor and stuff. And it's like, it's kind of expected of you. And if you're not comfortable with that, don't resent the fact that you just paid triple the price that you maybe should have. Like, it's okay to, negotiate on price with people, because I think it treats them as with a kind of respect of being a business like you're a business. They can decide for themselves what they need, and they're intelligent and know what they need to earn, presumably. And if you just fairly say, hey, this is 50 cents over last year. I know these costs went up. I know you're not asking for this because, for nothing, but do you think we could meet in the middle? Do you think you could do this? And to me, that feels like fair. And if they can't, they can't. I mean, I want to deal with coffee sources where their coffee is good. And so if it doesn't work out with us, with Sweet Maria's, they will have another buyer because they have something real to stand on. And I mean, it's kind of tricky because, I don't know, I feel like sometimes this idea of you're helping farmers by buying the coffee has a patronizing feeling. It may feel like you're respecting them in a way, but I sometimes think it's the opposite. It's, you see like you're doing something good, and that's like charity. And that charity may ultimately not benefit anybody. It may in the short term. But like if someone, for example, it's a cool story behind their coffee or something, and you're buying it, and then your business, whatever, fails, goes a different direction or something, just doesn't buy from that country that year. When they take their coffee out to sell it, they're either going to have to find someone like you who's, quote, charitable, unquote, or they're going to have to take a lot less money because their coffee maybe wasn't worth it in and of itself. So I think it's important on quality to be honest, and I think having that as the basis of buying coffee can be pretty solid. It's a real value that they can take to somewhere else and someone else, and it'll be there for them. So I don't think that's not like A or B, yes or no. It's not really a perfect solution, because I can see something kind of patronizing in that too, but between two different approaches in buying coffee, I think that's better. For me, it feels a little better. Anyway, I didn't expect to go that way talking this morning. I was kind of saying that I do these recordings early in my trip when I'm really sort of psyched. Because I'm like excited to be on a trip. You sort of pay a price with the anxiety if everything will work out, and the flights, and sitting in a seat for 24 hours to get somewhere. But then I'm like, after all these years, I'm very excited. And so usually early in the trip, I have these recordings, and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And then like halfway through, I'm like, I'm so tired. This trip, I mean, at the end, I'm going to stay a few days in one place, but we've been kind of moving every night, so I don't even unpack and just, I don't fully unpack, just kind of put my things down, get out what I need, put it back in, and head out again. And I'm like a big homebody, so I don't like that. I'm kind of, a bit slower than that, and I don't feel like covering a lot of ground in a place is better than just sort of slowing it down and focusing a little more, even though that may still be 30-minute visits. But it's neat to be somewhere I haven't been. I really don't know Arusha, this northern Tanzania, which was the traditional coffee area, but it's really dwindling down. This is like 5 to 10% now of the Tanzania crop, and it used to be really, it's all the names everyone talks about. I mentioned I went to a farm called just Kilimanjaro yesterday, and it's a big farm that during the socialist times they kind of lost it. It was made public, nationalized, and then they returned, and it was kind of had degraded a lot and sort of rebuilt it, the family, and it employs a lot of people in this area. It's a big job generator. But I asked them, what about Blackburn Estate? Because that was a really well-known, old Tanzania farm. And the guy I'm going around with who's an exporter and the farm manager, Colton, didn't even know the name. They were like, I don't know. It's funny to me. It just seems like things have just kind of faded out here in terms of the older estate type farms. Though we did buy some coffee from one in the south, Kanjilalji, which is a larger farm. But a lot of what we're looking for here are the co-op coffees, like the Ilomba that we have coming, that just arrived in the U.S. Just this week, I think. So Tanzania is a very, perhaps for a lot of people, a difficult place to export coffee from and to really find and maintain quality in small lots because of a lot of reasons, a lot of internal regulations that, are presumably there to protect farmers, but it's a very politicized coffee export system. And we visited Tanzania Coffee Board yesterday, went to their auction room and their cupping lab and everything here in Moshi. And, I had mentioned something that we've been talking about is that, different political regimes here influence coffee a lot. They change rules a lot. And part of that is because coffee farmers that's a big population and they represent a lot of votes. So they want to appease them and do things that sound good, even if in the long run they don't build and grow the coffee industry. And by that meaning help farmers plant more plants, support them in agriculture, like actually support their incomes through through investment in this crop. And they do things short term and that, don't really help them. Like their agriculture program here is incredibly underfunded. And I'm told if they have a field agent for agronomy to go out and help people, and they really need it here, they need good soil analysis. It's like challenging place. A lot of coffee produces very little. They don't get support on pruning, which really needs to happen. And but in the field, there'll be one agronomist for like 5,000 farmers. Like they can't even start to do anything meaningful with any groups of farmers. So a lot of times the export companies kind of take that on because they sign a contract with a co-op to export their coffee, and they want to make sure like they have coffee and that maybe next year there's trees are being planted and pruned so there's more coffee. But it's like kind of has this opposite effect, the Tanzania Coffee Board, and they're stuck between the politicians and the directives they get on that side and then what they know are good because they're like trained agronomists and coffee experts. But they're kind of just throw up their hands. They have to do what they're told. And this top-down sort of style is really not very dynamic, and I think ends up hurting coffee farmers, basically. They have very low yields here, and it's not growing. And it's a place, too, where they talk a lot. The politicized part of it is talking about price, like what price are you paying? Price. And, you find this a lot of places, and even in the marketing, people are like, we pay a great price to farmers. But it's like volume matters so much. If you don't have much coffee to sell, no matter if you get an amazing price, it doesn't do much. Growing, getting good production, having a lot of cherries on the tree, knowing how to treat trees well and having the resources to do that is so important. And it's really something that I'm seeing all over here. The fancier farm we went to yesterday that has good investment, that's really well organized, you can see that their production is really high. They're growing under, managed shade trees. It's like lush and beautiful. And you'll see other places with just no shade, spindly little trees. Environmentally, it's not very sound. And for the coffee, it's just not going to produce much. And even if they did have great coffee, which they probably don't, and got a great price, it doesn't go very far. If you have 1,000 kgs to sell at a fantastic price, it doesn't mean much in what you can reinvest in the farm, as opposed to having 5,000 kgs that you sell at a good price and potentially some at a great price. So that's just kind of on my mind here. But it's nice to see this place and kind of understand the specific issues. One of the things with coming to producing regions is that, I was just at SCA like a month ago, and you hear talk about this and talk about that and what farmers need and this, but you come to specific regions and you realize that like coffee in one place and coffee in another place are just not the same thing. There's a whole nother way that you need to think about and talk about coffee and, apply these sort of ideas that, first of all, doesn't just come from some forum held in Portland, Oregon, by people that, have the means to travel there, or the position to travel there. It needs to come from the location itself. And, it's great to have ideas come in that are from somewhere else and are fresh. but it's also important to have ideas bubble up from the specifics, from what does coffee need here? What do coffee farmers need here? And here is even, in Moshi in the north is not Bozi or Mbeya or the regions in the south or along Lake Victoria or Tarame or any other place. They're from here. So I just think there's a kind of hubris in the way coffee gets talked about uniformly and unilaterally and just as a singular thing and coming to a producing region. And I think one of the reasons travel in coffee is good and enriches a person's understanding of it is the specificity of each place. Getting that context and understanding how what coffee is here is not what coffee is somewhere else. And a coffee farmer here is not a coffee farmer somewhere else. And that's why, that's why the local agronomist to me is one of the most important people because they bring in knowledge and expertise, but they're always trying to look at the context in order to find out what actually works on the ground and what people will actually do, which is probably the most important thing of all. So yeah, that's morning thought over Guatemalan coffee in Moshi, Tanzania. If this is like a podcast and I'm finishing it up, I don't know how to end it, but thanks for listening.